When you hear the word skin, you might not be thinking about the largest organ in the whole entire body. That's called the integumentary system. You might be asking yourself, what is the integumentary system? Well, I have an answer for you. The integumentary main function of the skin is a barrier to protect the body from the outside world, and it's also a function to retain body fluids, protects against diseases, eliminates waste products, and regulates body temperature. For example, if you have ever experienced a burn, had any surgeries, have tattoos, you know that the skin can form many complications when damaged, but it can also heal very quickly. It is also a layer to protect the body from chemicals, diseases, UV lights, and physical damage. You may also be questioning yourself, what makes this integumentary system? Well, the skin, nails, hair, sebaceous glands, also known as oil glands, and pseudoreferous glands, also known as your sweat glands. The skin has three types of layers. One is the epidermis, second is dermis, the third one is hypodermis. The epidermis is a waterproof layer that protects the body from the environmental pathogens. This is a layer that's only visible and is made out of squamous epithelial tissues. The second layer is dermis, and this layer contains tough connective tissues and different types of cells and glands, and this layer is made of dense, irregular connective tissues. This layer is also full of collagen, elastic fibers, which can help your skin stay strong, and full of capillaries, blood vessels, and mostly it has nerves, fibers, and registers sensation, temperature, pressure, and pain. And then lastly, there is hypodermis, which is a padding to the layer against shock, trauma, and maintains core and body temperatures. This layer is made of adipose connective tissues, and this is also very deep to the dermis, is a layer of loose connective tissues. This hypodermis basically acts as a flexible connection between the skin and the underlying muscles, and is used basically as a fat storage. Overall, all these layers have their unique skin duties of cells. And fun fact, if you get a tattoo, make sure that it gets below the epidermis layer. And now moving on to the cells, there are four types of cells, which are the keratinocytes, melanocytes, Langerhans cells, Merkel cells. So the keratinocytes is basically a block of fibers, protein, keratin that gives structure, durability, and it's also waterproof. This is the outer layer of the skin. Basically, the cells they basically are dying and replaced all the time, so we lose tons of cells every day. For example, if you rub your hands together, we're basically losing lots of cells, and they're constantly being replaced. The melanocytes are cells that give the skin color, and they produce pigment melanin to protect the skin from ultraviolet radiation and also sunburns. The Langerhans are basically unwanted cells. They originate in our bone marrow, and then when they develop in the epidermis layer, and it also protects the skin from infections, and also by stimulating allergic reactions. The Merkel cells, they create a sensory receptor for touch, and it's deep between the dermis and the epidermis layer. All of these cells are organized differently all over the body. In some places we have more epidermis than others. And also on the right, I have thick skin, which is basically the tougher spots of the palm, and also our soles of our feet. So they consist of 5 epidermis layers, and then also the thin skin is basically covers everything else of the body with 4 layers. Now we have the 5 main layers of the epidermis, which are the sternum bacilli, sternum spinosum. We also have the sternum granosum. We have the sternum lucidum, and then we have the sternum corneum. So the first one are the sternum bacilli, which are basically single rows of cells attached to the epidermis. They're also called the young cells, and this is where melanocytes produce the pigment in the melanin. For the second one, we have the sternum spinosum, which are composed of many layers and spiky cells with large nuclei. This layer gives epidermis its strength. The third one, we have the sternum granulosum, which is basically a component that are produced by the skin cells. The third one, we have the sternum lucidum, which are translucent cells spreading the sternum corneum and sternum granulosum. This is also an extra layer only in the thick skin and the soles of the palms. And the last one, the fifth one, is the sternum corneum, composed of dead epithelial cells filled with protein, keratin, and then this layer makes the skin feel very rough and very dry. And now, if you see here, there is a diagram of the hair. So the hair is basically made out of dead keratin cells. And in the diagram, you can see that the hair begins in the epidermal layer, making its way up to the dermis. And this is called the hair follicle. Then the hair shaft is the part of the hair that's not anchored to the follicle. And as you can see, that's the exposed surface. Then the rest of the hair that's anchored in the follicle is between the surface of the skin, which is called the hair root, and then the hair root ends deep in the epidermis at the hair bulb, and this includes a layer of active basal cells, also called the hair matrix. Then the hair bulb borders the hair papilla, and the hair papilla is made of connective tissues, in which contains blood, capillaries, and the nerve endings of the dermis. So basically, the hair acts as a physical barrier to the body from water, injuries, chemicals, and also microorganisms. Lastly, the picture on the right is a diagram, and the diagram is a hair structure of the medulla, cortex, and the cuticle. And the medulla is basically the core. So there's the dead cells contain soft keratin and also provide flexibility. And then the cortex is the middle layer where the dead cells contain keratin to provide basically sturdiness, and the cuticle is the outer layer, and that overlaps the dead keratin cells to form their shiny surface. And now we're moving on to the nails. As you can see in the diagram of the finger, the nails is basically what protects our toes and our fingers and our toes, which is the visible portion of the nail, which is also made out of the dead cells packed with keratin. Also in the diagram, you can see the lunula, which is the palest crest of the base of the nail. Then we have the nail root, which is the nail is basically beneath the skin, just behind the fingernail. And then we have the proximal nail fold. Most proximal aspect of the periosteum, that's the site of basically where we have our ingrown nails and infection happens. And then we have the epiosteum, which is basically the cuticles, and this provides basically the waterproof barrier for the nail. Then you can see we have the nail body, and then we have the hapiosteum is the area between the nail palette and the fingertip, and basically it's the junction between the free edge of the nail, as you can see in the picture of the nail, and then the skin of the fingertip, also providing also a waterproof barrier. And then we have the flexnus, which is also the bone, and also in the picture you can see the epidermis and the dermis layer. And now we're moving on to the sebaceous glands, and the sebaceous glands are also known as the oil glands. And then this gland is made out of fat, also called lipids. This gland produces a natural oil that's called sebum, which helps keep the skin very soft and also keeps the skin waterproof and from becoming very dry, brittle, and cracked. And how I had mentioned before that we only have thick skin located on our palms and soles of our feet. Well, these oil glands only exist throughout through the skin, just not in those two specific locations. And then this gland basically helps keep the skin very moisturized. And now lastly, we have my favorite. We have the pseudoreferous gland, which is also basically your sweat gland. Sweat is not my favorite thing, as I meant as pseudoreferous. The word is my favorite. And also here in the picture we have, you can see the where the two sweat glands are located. And we have two sweat glands. We have the eccrine and the apocrine gland. The eccrine gland occurs over mostly everywhere in our body, and directly onto the surface of our skin. The apocrine gland opens into the hair follicle, which leads to the surface of the skin, and then this area develops in the area basically where we have hair follicles such as our scalp and our armpits area. And now that I have summarized the integumentary system, you might be having some questions of maybe when we age, what changes? Well, basically, aging of the skin definitely changes. We get, our skin gets very saggy, we get wrinkles, and we also develop aging spots, or also liver spots. Our body temperature declines, our sweat glands change. Then when our sweat glands do change, it leaves our skin very itchy, flaky, and scaly. Our stem cells production decreases, our nail color decreases in our fingers and our toes, and our vitamin D also declines, this affects our skeletal health a lot. And this is the end of my presentation, and everybody make sure to wear your sunscreen. We should be protected no matter what. Thank you.